During World War I, Britain was the first to deploy rhomboid tanks on the battlefield. Walter Gordon Wilson, one of the designers, naturally received recognition. Although he was later awarded the Tank Invention Award, he was unable to participate in the subsequent model development after the first tank was completed. His partner, Sir Triton, began the development of a new tank after being promoted to major. Wilson, who had been promoted to lieutenant colonel, decided to independently develop another new tank, firmly believing that he could create a better tank model. In fact, Wilson did have good research and development capabilities. He began working on the drawings around July 1917, and by the second half of the year, he had already created a wooden model. This rhomboid tank, later known as the MKB, made a deep impression on the relevant departments and received orders before it was even produced. So, what are the characteristics of the MKB tank? First, its body structure and shape were basically the same as the original rhomboid tank, except that the structure was slightly compressed and lengthened to facilitate crossing trenches on the battlefield. The original rhomboid tank had protruding sponson turrets on both sides, but the MKB eliminated this design and added a rectangular fixed turret on top of the tank. Wilson intended to install a 2-pounder gun, 40mm caliber, as the main weapon inside the turret. Although the 2-pounder gun did not have armor-piercing shells during World War I, the gun designer, Maxime Lachasse, developed an automatic version of the 2-pounder gun. If the MKB was equipped with it, the firepower would have been quite impressive. Multiple explosive shells hitting enemy tanks could have destroyed them, not to mention infantry. The real major change in the MKB tank came from the interior. The interior of the first-generation rhomboid tank was chaotic, with no compartmentalization for the crew, engine, and ammunition, all squeezed into the same space. The advantage was that the crew could repair the engine and other structures at any time, but the disadvantage was the harsh working environment, with crew members often experiencing dizziness or even fainting due to excessive gas inhalation. It is unknown whether Wilson considered the previous design flaws or learned from the experience of other tanks on the battlefield, but he separated the engine compartment of the MKB, placing it at the rear of the tank. Although the crew could no longer repair the engine inside, the improvement in the reliability of the power and transmission systems avoided this need. The tank used a 100 horsepower 4-cylinder engine, with a gearbox installed behind the engine. 2 fuel tanks, each capable of holding 386 liters, were also located at the rear. Above the exhaust pipe, a container held chemical substances that could be released to create a large amount of smoke, which was very useful on the battlefield. The armor of the tank was slightly stronger than that of the first-generation rhomboid tank, although it was still riveted steel armor. The maximum thickness increased from 12 mm to 14 mm, and it likely used specialized armor plates rather than the previous boiler steel plates. In the subsequent production, the tank was not equipped with the 2-pounder gun. Instead, it had 5 machine gun ports, as well as 2 machine gun ports on the sides of the hull. Not every firing port was used, and it was said to carry 4 machine guns. The gunner could move the machine guns to the appropriate firing port during combat. The MKB tank initially received an order for 450 units, which was later increased to 700 units. However, with the end of World War I, only 450 tanks were produced in total, and only a small portion were delivered to the British Army. The rest were sold overseas, and a few were left to rust and be scrapped. Compared to the first-generation rhomboid tank, the MKB did show improvement in various performance aspects, but the degree of improvement was limited. In terms of design concept, it was no match for tanks like the Renault FT-17, and the rhomboid tank was destined to be phased out. The MKB tank weighed 18 tons, was 6.9 meters long, 2.7 meters wide, and 2.6 meters high. It had a maximum speed of 10 km per hour and a maximum range of 105 kilometers. The tank had a crew of only 4, consisting of a driver, a commander, a machine gunner, and a mechanic.